This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. A few years ago, I went out to Hollywood for actually the first time. I think I was I never can tell where the line of demarcation is. I think I was probably in Beverly Hills. And I had to go to a meeting, right? I had to go to this meeting with this hotshot agent guy that was working on a show, and everybody in Hollywood's got a new idea. They've all got a new idea, and they if they think you're right for it, they want to get you to participate in it. So I was out there and I was thinking, wow, it's kind of cool, but it's an odd world. It's different, it seems almost synthetic, and I think a lot of it is. But what goes on behind the back doors and all these deals and everything is completely different than the individuals that you see appear on screen, either the big screen or small screen. Can you imagine having a phone conversation with the likes of George Clooney or maybe Whoopi Goldberg or Dolly Parton? And it's kind of your norm, to be in that world. But for those of us that, just kind of live in flyover country, it's a completely different take that we have. Today, I want to talk about a man who lived in that world and about his son who arguably, perhaps perpetrated a mass homicide. We're going to have a conversation today about what Sam Haskell IV allegedly did. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. I'm here with my buddy Dave Mack. Dave, you get out there in the thin air with some of these people, and I don't know. I guess there's kind of an idea that you have moral license maybe to do anything you want to, that laws don't apply to you. We've heard that over. I mean, how many times have we heard
those
that
entitled
over and over?
people?
Yeah, the entitled people. I think I remember back, and I know I'll catch some grief over this, but I remember what's her name? The young actress from Little Blonde. She was in Legally Blonde, I think, and
Reese
Witherspoon, and she got pulled over in Atlanta a few years ago with her husband. And she did the whole thing where she jumped out of the car and looked at a Georgia State trooper and said, "Don't you know who I am?" And he's thinking, I might not right now, but I will in a minute, and you're going to know who I am too. It's when that the fantasy world kind of catches up, with the reality of the real world that we all kind of exist in. And I don't know, maybe that extends out to this family that we're talking about today.
Sam
What remains of a family.
Right. Sam Haskell III is the super agent who was Dolly Parton and George Clooney's management when he was working at the William Morris Agency. Sam Haskell III was. But his son, Sam Haskell IV, is the murderer, or the alleged murderer. Sam Haskell IV is at the very center of a story that began for most of us when a homeless guy out in L.A. is digging through a dumpster at 6:15 in the morning in Encino, and he comes across a headless body, a torso. Now, the guy's looking for some old food to eat, right? Getting his breakfast out of the dumpster, and finds a body or a headless body and calls the cops. That's where most of us started with the story, because TMZ and a few other websites like that had video going up of this poor guy. Can you imagine what he's going through to this day, Joe? A homeless guy?
Here's something from a death investigator's perspective. It's really amazing, and I've had this happen a number of times over the course of my career. When you get out there and we generally, there's a term that we use in our descriptor of people that initially lay eyes on the body, and we will call them the finder. And that that's in our vernacular so that when we communicate with either other investigators, detectives, maybe the doc, whoever it is, even the crime lab will say, well, this is a sample from the finder. And they automatically, they understand what that means. And also to kind of emphasize this is a found death. This is not something that was witnessed per se. So yeah, this guy, I've actually had people, I had a lady one time that found a guy hanging nude in his motel room by a dog collar, and he was involved in autoeroticism. And Dave, she may have been 5 foot tall, weighed about 90 pounds. And I'll never forget, she was from Guatemala. And this poor lady could not speak English. She was a housekeeper, and she had the pass key to the door obviously to the room. She didn't get an answer when she knocked on it. She opens the door, and the bathroom is immediately to the left, and he's hanging from the hinge by a dog collar of the bathroom, fully naked. And Dave, she was trembling on the floor, and I'll never forget, this little lady had her rosary beads in her hands, and she was praying, and she couldn't stop trembling. So yeah, and it impacts people. I mean, who goes about their daily routine? Right. Even if this guy's a homeless guy, he's living his life, man.
He's looking for something to eat. It's 6:15 in the morning, Joe. And
who expects
that's
this?
Why this guy's not. I hope somebody's helping him. That's all. But to move on with the story began there. The video up online, TMZ, and all of the other websites, because anything in Hollywood takes on the added glare of Hollywood and Encino and where it tracked back. Because according to police, once they got to the dumpster, they found the headless body. They found this torso. But there was other evidence. There were other clues inside the bag that contained this torso. And it was the clues inside the bag that they still haven't told us what they found. It will come out at trial, but it led them straight back to Sam Haskell IV. This family, the Haskell family, is living in a 6-bedroom home in Tarzana. He's living there with his wife, who, by the way, is missing, and her mom and dad. They're both missing. And then they have 3 boys, 6, 8, and 12. They are not missing. They're accounted for, and they're now living with other family. But Sam Haskell IV's wife and her parents, his in-laws, all missing. And that's where this crime begins. The investigation begins there with the torso in the dumpster being found by a homeless guy at 6:15 in the morning on a Wednesday.
Yeah, and this is a big home that they have, Dave. 6 bedrooms, man. I can only imagine what that would set you back. Even in Tarzana, which I'm sure is a fine town.
Well, you got Tarzana, Encino, and all of the valley. I mean, and by the way, this is the area of the first Karate Kid movie, to give you an idea.
Right.
Where Ralph Macchio, I think they were in Encino on the Tarzana side, but it wasn't like it is now. Okay, everything there has gotten bigger and better. But something that they found in that bag led them back to the house. But here's the other kicker, Joe. The night before the body was found, at 4:00 in the afternoon, a group of Hispanic men were paid $500 by a guy to take some rocks, 3 bags of rocks, and just get rid of them. Paid them $500. Now, I don't know about you. Somebody offers me $500 to get rid of 3 bags of rocks. I'm your guy. I'm your huckleberry. Thing is, these Hispanic day workers, they didn't think the bags felt like they had rocks in them. And they're like a block away from the house, and they decide, we're looking. They open it up, and they open one of the bags, and what do they find? A belly button. They see a belly button, and that was enough. Seal it back up. There were not rocks in these bags. It felt like they were carrying meat, and they were each about 50 pounds a bag. They take it right back to Sam Haskell IV's house. That's who hired them to move them. They put them in the driveway. And he says, oh, you're mistaken. These are just Halloween things. Nah, don't worry about what it is. But these guys are freaked out, Joe. They immediately leave Sam Haskell IV's home in Tarzana and head straight to the first police station they can see. Meanwhile, 7 minutes after they leave, Sam Haskell IV has loaded a bag into his car and he takes off. Now, the reason I bring this up now is because the Hispanic men go to the first place they saw that had police signs on it, right? It was the Highway Patrol, though. And the California Highway Patrol is not a city police department that would handle Tarzana. And that's what they were told, go someplace else. None of them spoke English as a first language, so there was a communication problem. They end up going to another police station, and it's kind of a comedy of errors as they're doing this thing, because they go inside this police station in the entry area, and they're trying to explain what they have found to make the report. And they're at Topanga Station, and the police on the inside are going, nobody in here speaks Spanish. Go outside.
How is that possible in California?
In LA. Yeah, that's what actually did surprise me. But a lot has been made about this when they said, get out of here, go outside and call 911. That's not what happened. There was nobody that spoke Spanish in the building that could take the report. But knowing if they would go outside and call 911, they could get a Spanish-speaking operator, right, and then they could make that's why that'll happen. Now, granted, there's been a big investigation that is still not completed on this yet to troubleshoot what happens when somebody comes in to file a dead body claim, body parts claim, blood claims, and what if the guys didn't go outside and call 911, Joe? What if they went outside and just left? That's enough.
Yeah, no kidding. And keep in mind, Sam Haskell IV's children are still alive.
Right.
Let that sink in just for a second. If in fact he is involved in this and he committed these crimes, how do you know that there would not be another moment in time that would set him off? Right. And now, because you've kind of shooed them away, those kids get in jeopardy. I think they're in jeopardy anyway. Yeah. But you just kind of up the ante. But back to the Topanga Station, I've got a solution for it. It's pretty easy. Hire people that speak Spanish.
Right.
That's pretty easy. That's kind of simple. But that's a discussion for another day.
I was shocked at that, though.
Yeah, no, and I'm wondering with their movement of these bags. Okay, that is the workers. I'm wondering how much cross-contamination there might be from them. What did they do? Were the bags tied? Because if they're tied, that's in a very specific configuration that is unique. It's not as unique as like handwriting, but it is unique as to how people tie the bags, if it's a real complex knot or whether it's a simple knot. And who in the world uses bags to move rocks? Now, I see commercials on television where they'll say, well, this bag can carry anything.
Right.
But who in their right mind actually decides, I'm going to put a bunch of rocks in a bag, a plastic bag? Most of the time, when you use plastic bags, just for instance, and I'm not diminishing deaths here, but just understand it from a biological standpoint, we have plastic bags in our home, in our garbage cans, right? The reason we do that is that they are non-porous. They're non-porous because we don't want all of the nastiness that's in our home after we're done cooking and all of that stuff. And we put that, and it, how it always kind of gathers at the bottom, seeks the lowest point of gravity. And Lord help you if you prick that bag and it leaks everywhere. Well, if you have a torso, it's going to leak. And I would think that whoever thought this thing through didn't think it through quite enough, because it's very easy to just feel the outside of a bag and tell the difference between rocks and human remains. You've never worked in a butcher shop. You've never handled human remains. For all I know, you might be terrified by the sight of blood. But let's say your fury has driven you to the point where you would begin to think about killing someone that's in your orbit, and not just one person, but 3. And now you have to make a decision. What am I going to do with them? Dave, I think that's a rather interesting position to be in for the average person walking down the street. Of course, the accused, the alleged perpetrator here, is, I guess, by the standards of us mere mortals out here, he's not an average person. He has a lot of resources at his disposal, this sort of thing. Maybe he thought that he could get away with this, but it seems as though that the police have other ideas at this point.
Joe, there is a lot going on with this story and inside the home. And fascinating in talking to, or not me talking, but in researching this particular case, Sam Haskell IV, his wife, her name is Mei, M-E-I, okay, Mei Li Haskell. She's 37. As we mentioned earlier, they have 3 boys that are just wonderful children from everything I'm hearing from everybody, 6, 8, and 12. But it's interesting that they would entertain in their home, the Haskells would, and the neighbors would come over. But whenever that happened, it was like Mei Li Haskell was the reason people were there. They just adored her. And Sam Haskell would become very withdrawn. He would pull back to himself. And even if it was in his own home, he acted like he was not belonging. He loved his samurai sword collection too. And he liked to show it off. He also had a bunch of guns, liked to show those off. But people could not understand the connection, because on the one hand, you had his wife, May, that everybody loves. And then you got this other guy who seems really not all there. I mean, he just is an indulgent, or I don't know him, but he sure does seem to be one of the individuals who thinks, because my dad was super rich and successful, so am I. I'm going to go into the family business. Yeah, your dad's a doctor, so you don't need to go to law school. My dad's a doctor. I'm good. Sam Haskell IV is 35, son of Sam Haskell III. When you look at Sam Haskell IV's resume, he has done a low-budget video, film. He did a program. I don't know if it was a film or what. I saw a clip of it that had Brandi Glanville. She's in that, used to be in the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And she had a small part in, it looked like a high school teen drama type thing.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, but I've watched some TikTok videos that he posted, and he just goes rambling. I mean, Joe, about things that make no sense, talking about Hollywood stars and a real entitled mess. And it's so funny to put him over here on that side of what you see, and then what people talk about with his wife. And you realize his beautiful 37-year-old wife, the one everybody loved, is missing along with her parents. We don't know where they are.
Yeah, and if it's this is another thing that I kind of came across here in this tale, and it gives you an idea about the family dynamic. Mei Li and their children, her and Haskell's children, all resided there, but also her parents. My understanding is that their note. Did you see what the cost was? Their monthly note on that house is?
No, I didn't.
$7,000 a month.
That's it? Huh.
Yeah. And she paid the note.
Oh, not him.
Let that sink in. Yeah, not him. She paid the note on that monthly, monthly when it would come due for the mortgage. And so I found that quite interesting. And friends had made comments, relative to that. So what you're looking for, I think, is if you have these individuals where they are missing, you have this odd family dynamic where he's now supposed to be the head of the household, if you will. He's supposed to be a breadwinner. He's supposed to be achieving, and your wife is actually bringing home the bacon, per se. And I would imagine that he began, and I hate people that say, well, it made me feel this way. I'm sure that it's making him feel somewhat diminished. And you begin to think about a lot of cases that we work, it comes into focus, that anger, that little bit of anger, because what we're talking about here is a mass slaying. And we're also talking about not just a slaying, Dave, but we're talking about the abuse of a corpse. And that goes to a completely different level when you begin to try to consider what may have happened, how did it happen, and is it possible that the ME can explain anything?
That's what I was going to ask you, because when you start with in this particular case, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the investigation did not just begin at 6:15 in the morning when a homeless guy finds a torso in a dumpster. It began from our standpoint of us hearing about it. But once that call was made, all of a sudden, the previous day's activities all of a sudden made sense, because it was the day before, actually 14 hours earlier, at about 4:00 in the afternoon, when Sam Haskell IV hires a couple of Hispanic day workers, pays them $500 to get rid of 3 bags of rocks. They return saying there's a belly button in here. This ain't rocks. And they give him the money back and leave the bags in the driveway and take off and go to the police. So you've got that report being made after 4:00, the day before the body is found. And the report, it says a neighbor called in and told police they saw what appeared to be body parts in Sam Haskell IV's backyard in his driveway. So police went out to look. By the time they got there, Sam Haskell IV was gone, and they didn't see any sign of any bags or any body parts. So without having anything to go on, they couldn't just breach the gate and go looking. They didn't have a search warrant. So they couldn't go any further, and they had no reason to investigate further. Might have been a prank call. Neighbor that doesn't like him.
Yeah, it could be. And, most of the time, if you, this goes to something that we use that we talk about in investigations. I think a lot of people don't understand this, but there's two frameworks that you work under. If you have things that are in plain view, it's called the plain view doctrine. If you pull somebody over in a car and you look in and there's a human hand laying on the seat, then that provides you cause. There's also another legal precedent that was established, and it's called the open fields doctrine. And it's kind of the same thing, but it's like if you don't have to use something in order for you to view an area, if you can plainly see it in an open area, the open fields doctrine, that will give the police probable cause. And this is not a welfare check. Lots of times if the cops are going out on a welfare check, they can force their way in if they think somebody is in danger at that point in time. You don't have to go get a warrant at that point in time. Now, once you've confirmed that they're there and they're deceased, then you have to back out. People don't understand that. You cannot stay in the house with the dead body, even if it's a homicide. You have to go get a warrant. So you secure the scene, you go get a warrant, and then you come back and you work the scene. You don't let anybody else into the house, but you have to get a warrant before you enter back in. And even
though the body's dead, it's sitting there and bleeding. Wow.
Yeah. Or once you've established that there is no longer an emergent situation, then.
So once you notice it's static, nothing's going to change. I'm not touching.
Nothing's going to change. And the police will set up a perimeter at that point. And what you do, and I've spent hours outside of a house. I actually had a guy that was laying out of a threshold of a house. He'd been shot multiple times. But we had to wait, and it's in literally plain sight of the entire neighborhood. Cameras are there, everything else. And there is a body laying across the threshold that has obviously sprung several leaks.
Wow.
And we had to wait. I know it took us probably 5 hours, Dave, to get that warrant so that we could make entry, because the ADA, for whatever reason, was not available. There wasn't a magistrate available.
Wow.
And it's problematic. But listen, you would rather wait and be safe, because anything that you find at that scene, let's say that you have a headless corpse, all right? But if the head has been taken and placed into the freezer, okay, that's a protected hidden space. Without a warrant, the authorities don't have the legal backing to go in and go digging through hidden spaces,
okay,
in small areas. So they have to do that.
In the dumpster, where a homeless guy finds the torso in a bag in the dumpster, I wanted to ask you about it, because that's an open area accessible to anybody.
Yeah, so the law regards that as you no longer caring about it. You've tossed it. So those constitutional protections from that perspective fade away. So if we We can go around to any number of dumpsters that might be, and I hope that they did, to recover everything that they would need to recover, because that's essential here.
Well, it's fascinating how this worked out with people. I don't want to say they were busybodies, but somebody saw a man in a Lexus getting a bag out of the trunk of his car, and took a picture of the car and its tag. And so the next day, when the body or the torso is recovered out of the dumpster, the person who took the picture went, "Hey, maybe this will help police," and sends it to him. And the detective on the scene said this, and I highlighted this because I needed to ask you, Joe. He was asked a question in a press conference about the condition of the torso. Do you still refer to it as a corpse, even though it's not a full body?
Okay. Yeah, you can use corpse. Yeah,
right.
Sure.
He said, quote, "Just from visual inspection, the stages of decomposition were relatively early, so no more than a day or two," about how long the body had been dead. Because we haven't established anything at this point. They just have a dead part of a body, no head. And that's what they have in this bag. And that's where they have to now trace it back. But again, they knew to go to Haskell's house. Whatever was inside that bag
contained,
I don't know if he left a note in there saying, "Catch me if you can. Here's my name. Here's my address," because they went straight to his house.
Or he dropped his wallet.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows from that perspective? But yeah, maybe. And you find this, and this is really difficult forensically, Dave. And I'm thinking about the nightmare that is working a dumpster, because it is. It's like taking. If you've ever seen somebody if you see somebody that takes like 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and they just try to do it piece by piece without ordering. Imagine that, and then multiply that, because if you ever take a look in a dumpster and you just look around, first off, it's layered, because with every person that comes by to dump their refuse, you're dealing with that bottom, and we call it in the earth when we're doing burials, we call it stratification. So you have stratified levels. All right. So you'll have like a really ancient area that maybe the body is deposited on. Same thing will apply to dumpsters. And if you really want a nightmare, work a case from a landfill, because not only do you have the evidence, or say a human remain that is stratified in there, dependent upon when that dump took place. With landfills in particular, they have a schedule as to where and location. Like they direct their trucks to go to grid section 2B. All right. And the next day will be 2C, because you want to try to keep it even. And then what's really problematic is that, just like with the dumpster, you may have had other homeless people digging around in there. If it's an area to look for food, they're trampling in, they're bringing anything, and anybody else that dumps household garbage there, you've got them layering on top of it. You go to the landfill, you got those big machinery. Have you ever seen those things? They don't have rubber tires. They've got steel tires, and they actually drive over the stuff to compact it. So it really becomes a nightmare. That's why from a timeline perspective, it's so important to try to determine when that dumpster was last emptied, who emptied it, and where did they empty it. But this is backing up to what the chief said. When we're talking about decompositional changes and trying to establish that all-important postmortem interval, this is a real tell, because we know that in this particular case, we're not dealing with somebody that has been dead for days upon days upon days. We're talking about a fresh kill. Yeah, you want the ultimate puzzle. Try working on a puzzle that involves a human body. And I'm not just talking about from an intellectual exercise to try to determine disease and all that. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a body that has been dismembered and you're trying to understand, first off, when did these injuries occur, what was fatal, and what type of instrument may have generated this dissection. And I think that that's really important. And Dave, we're talking about layers. To put another layer on this, Mei's body is accounted for at this point in time, but there's two other adults living in this home other than Haskell himself and Mei Li. So
it's so sad.
Yeah,
the whole thing is so sad. The Haskells had 3 boys, 6, 8, and 12. Thankfully, when everything came down on that Wednesday, when the body, the torso was found in the dumpster, and police went to the Haskell home, the boys, all 6, 8, and 12, they were at school when their dad was arrested, and they were then put with a family member after, and that's where they've remained, because even though there was an assumption of whose torso they recovered in the dumpster, because Mei Li was missing, Mei Li Haskell, her mom and dad are still missing, Joe. We still do not have their bodies. They might not be dead. That's the reality of it. They could be anywhere. Chances are, I think it's presumed that they're dead because of what has transpired. Inside the home, when police went inside the home, they said you could tell a body had been dismembered. I've never heard a police officer, detective, or investigator actually say words of that effect when describing a scene. But I think it's because the scene that they ran into was so horrifying.
Yep.
The fact that Haskell was a big fan of samurai swords, guns, all these tools of destruction, to the point where a neighbor loved Mei Li, would let her kids play with Mei Li's kids, but would not let the children go upstairs where the guns were, or the samurai, and wouldn't let them be around him, Haskell. So when police,
that's a tell.
Yeah, it's a tell. It tells you everything you need to know about how people thought of this guy. But
yeah, that's why I always tell parents to respect the gut feeling,
Right.
always, no matter what. And here's the thing with the parents missing, and I think that it's very insightful. You're right. Police normally do not say this sort of thing. They don't make a comment like that.
Right.
Okay. It's more atypical. They won't go into graphic detail like that, but I'm sure that there's some level of frustration on their part at this moment in time.
But the autopsy, Joe. We've been waiting for the results from the autopsy of the torso that was found.
Yeah,
they're playing some things close to the vest, but the one thing we do know, the one thing we do know is that this torso that was found in the dumpster was missing the head, and we know there was a gory scene at the Tarzana home. So the autopsy report came out. I read some of it. It didn't make a lot of sense to me because I couldn't figure it out. And I'm going to ask you this straight out. I need you to tell me all the things you saw in it. But was she alive was she tortured? Can you tell that in an autopsy if she was kept alive long enough to experience all of the damage and her head being cut off?
Yes, we could tell. Yeah, most definitely. And they have not, as a matter of fact, the medical examiner actually stated that possibility could not be excluded, Dave. And just so our friends understand, and look, I think we've got very smart listeners, and they will have heard this elsewhere, but it bears repeating. When we're looking and trying to assess an injury, and trying to determine whether it is antemortem, before death, or postmortem, the trick is to always look for the hemorrhage. That's one thing that we can tell. So the ME saw something there in these dissected out areas that gave them an indication that there was possibly hemorrhage in these slices. And that again it will rock you to your core when you begin to think about this, that if she was not unconscious, that she may have had an awareness that this was going on. Hopefully, I'm hoping against hope that is not the case, but the ME could not rule it out. He had also stated that to this point, He couldn't rule out the possibility of her potentially having been drugged in some way, having been suffocated or smothered or asphyxiated in some way. So there's still a lot in the mix here, but they are seeing hemorrhage. Now, we don't know specifically where this hemorrhage is. I do know this, and this was striking. And a real, boy, you talk about really grab your attention. Whoever wielded this instrument that wound up, using this instrumentality for dismemberment, it was so sharp that the margins were really clean. So this is not like an event where you're talking about hacking away, like with a hatchet or an axe and that sort of thing. He did entertain the possibility, and I think I have an idea of what he's seeing. He talked about a power tool as well, which again adds a completely different level to this. If you bring in an element of torture here, if you use something like a sawzall, which is one of those little circular, saws that you can cut through things with, those margins are going to be very, very clean. They're not going to be real jagged. And also, when you get to the bone itself, it will have distinctive markings on that bone that can tie back to instruments. That's why in our field, we work very, very closely with tool mark examiners. They don't just look at pry marks on windows of burgled homes. They don't just look at how steering columns have been taken apart and what kind of instrument. We actually work with them when it comes to bone in particular to try to match up an instrument with the markings that are left behind. That's going to be significant, I think, in this case.
Do we know, were other parts of her body severed? I noticed the plural being used where actually it says, the report states, amputation sites, plural,
right,
were remarkably smooth.
Yeah. And what that means is that whatever location this individual decided to amputate at, it would be, okay, let me back up because this is important. You'd mentioned something that's really telling here, Dave, about the goriness. They saw something in that house that was like, okay, somebody's been dismembered here.
Right.
Well, how do you come to that conclusion if the body is not there? Well, first off, my first gut reaction is going to be probably a copious amount of blood.
Right.
More than likely. If you're talking about a power tool, as ghastly as this is, you do, just like sawdust, there is bone dust that's left behind, and it will actually appear blood tainted. You can see this white pile of dust, and it'll be blood tainted. You'll see that. They may have found an instrument, because what did he say in the report? He said power tool. So maybe they found something there that's going to have a remnant of biological evidence on it. That would not surprise me. It doesn't matter how you could take that damn thing and put it in a dishwasher, Dave, and there's still a possibility that you're going to recover something off of it. So how much more so if you're just trying to scrub it down? Because there's all those little nooks and crannies around the thing that you never fully account for. I think one of my concerns with this, they talk about how horrific the scene is, and one of the things they're going to be faced with, Dave, in Mei's murder and the status of her parents, is that if something has happened equally horrific to the parents, you're going to have commingling of biological evidence there. So you can have, let's just say, person A, B, and C, if they've all met roughly the same fate, and you're doing these dismemberments in the same location, you're going to have commingling of DNA that are on these surfaces. Even it doesn't matter really how much you clean up, because if he's doing this in a frenzy, if they are doing it in a frenzy, allegedly, then you can have this kind of mixing that goes on in there? And are you going to be able to kind of separate out these biological samples? First off, you expect to find all of their DNA there anyway, because that's their domicile. The trick is that what is the source of the DNA? Is it blood? Is it bone? Is it hair? Is it skin? What is it? And when I say skin, I'm not talking about dead skin cells, Dave. If this was a dismemberment, you would actually find skin tags, perhaps, in a lot of different places that may have come off of whatever instruments left behind. This is not an easy process. And so that's what the police are kind of, or the forensic scientists at least, are kind of, kind of suss through all of this stuff and try to understand it. Either way, they've got one whale of a case or cases on their hands now.
They also said in the autopsy report, quote, with the remains that were available for examination, an exact mechanism of death was unable to be determined. I don't think they have the head.
Yeah, I don't think that they do either at this point in time. It's funny sometimes, when you get these dismemberment things, it seems more often than not, many times the head is actually found away from the body. You remember, it was just last week we talked about the bodies in Long Island, and those heads were separate. As a matter of fact, I think the two heads in that case were found proximal to one another, and the rest of the remains were in another place. And that happens more often than not in these kinds of cases.
And that's actually, I was thinking about that case and the amount of blood from two bodies causing enough to clog the
drains.
And now in this home, where the home in Tarzana was a very big home, and I'm going to assume a number of bathrooms are there. If you're going to try to get rid of the remains of three bodies, all I can think of is we only have proof of one. We only have, and not even proof. We have an alleged killing of one person, and that is Mei Li Haskell, his wife. We have her torso, and we have an autopsy that's been done based on what they have. They gave us their opinion. Now, we don't have, I say we, they have not recovered. They have not found Mei Li's parents. They haven't found them either in life or in death. What they did come up with on Mei Li was the most likely possibilities of death, because the torso didn't reveal enough. But they said, when I saw these, I thought, Joe, I could have come up with these. The possibilities are blunt force trauma of the head and neck, gunshot wound of the head and neck, sharp force injury of the head and neck, and forms of asphyxia. Because if we don't have the head, those are all possible death modes, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's what's, that's gonna be one of the biggest problems. You begin to think about causality here, and they have to leave the table open. However, I think that it is significant, and we have to revisit this, that they're talking about sharp force injuries, and they're talking about her having potentially have been alive. That's significant in the case that they're seeing hemorrhage there, Dave. Okay. And I think that's going to be the thing that is, when they can put, the detectives will put this narrative together as they're conducting all of the interviews that they have to have. When this thing finally goes to trial, we might see more forensics in this trial than we have in a long, long time. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.